Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Anish Uday Kumar. I am the Senior Vice President of Product Management and Customer Experience here at Provus. A fun fact about me is I love this space. I love services quoting. I've been in this space for the longest time. And I just love engaging with customers, solving complex problems in this space. So, that's kind of who I am. And I'll be your host today. Right. So a little bit about Provus. Provus is an AI first quoting platform purpose built for services. So that purpose built part is very important, right? So services quoting platform AI first, right? To take away. We help services organizations drive efficiency, accuracy, and profitability. So in your day-to-day work, what does that mean? We enable services sellers to create accurate quotes. We help them price smarter, close deals faster, and preserve margins. So, and again, that's a kind of crux of it. So, when a company or an organization approaches us, we help them transform their legacy disconnected quoting processes, typically managed through spreadsheets, emails, or one-off tools, right? And we offer a unified intelligent platform where all the key personas related to services, sales, delivery, and operations teams can kind of collaborate on. So it's kind of a unifying point in the juncture while we do services quoting. So joining me today is my good friend Lyndsey Alexander, whom I'll introduce in just a second. Today, we're going to unpack a very important topic, which I've heard so many of my customers and prospect, deem very important. The topic is, how do I build an operational playbook for running a profitable services business, right? Today, we'll also talk about Trace3's transformation in its quoting process using the Provus solution. This is a very, very interesting story in terms of the level of insight it has on automation, on collaboration, and long-term success in terms of driving better margins and being successful end-to-end, right? Just before we dive in, a few quick things, right? Please feel free to use the chat to kind of start engaging with us. We'll answer questions as we go. If you're not able to get to all the questions, we'll get back to you guys. I know you're all registered. We'll get back to you guys right away. And then this session will be recorded and we'll provide you with the slides and the recording, right after, right? So that's kind of what it is. Now, the exciting part. I'm so excited to introduce our guest speaker, Lyndsey Alexander. She is the Senior Director of Business Operations at Trace3. I know Lyndsey. I've worked with Lyndsey quite a lot. So she has spent a lot of time in the services space. So I would consider her as a leading expert in operations and transformation when it comes to services. Lyndsey joined Trace3 in 2021. She has driven some incredible initiatives within the company, maybe from simple system implementations all the way to streamlining operational processes for Trace3. And Trace3 has a growing services portfolio. It is acquiring companies and getting bigger and bigger. I have had the privilege to work with her very closely during my engagement with Provus transformation at Trace3. And it has been truly collaborative and truly rewarding for me. And I hope it's the same for Lyndsey. So thank you, Lyndsey, for taking the time and joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. A little fun fact about myself that most people don't expect, since you shared a fun fact about yourself, is I used to actually do competitive bodybuilding back in the day. So for about 6 years, I stepped on stage in the bikini, did competitive bodybuilding, which was really interesting time, and definitely got over any shyness I ever had when I was younger, stepping on stage in front of a bunch of people. So that's just a fun fact about me, like I said, that most people don't expect. And a little bit of background, like you mentioned, I've been in the services industry over a decade and very focused in operations. If there's an operations function in services, I've done it. Account management, offshore operations, account and client facing consulting, all of it. I've touched all different aspects of operations, and it's truly been a remarkable career up until now. And I came over to Trace3, like you mentioned, in 2021, and managed our consulting business and operations, moved into office of the CTO to manage business operations and services. Also still manage some like the product and other operations as well. But over the last year, worked, like you said, with you and the Provus team to implement the Provus tool as part of our services maturity. So very excited to talk through kind of how we came about Provus as a tool and how that helped drive some processes and improvement for Trace3.
Yeah. And Lyndsey, your experience, in bodybuilding and otherwise, right, is really required. You need somebody who is bold and ready to take those decisions and be ready to kind of transform, right? I think, if jokes aside, I think that has helped us transform your kind of processes and help us where we are at this point.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Having that, that open, like honest, communication and not being afraid to like have those conversations, right? Is like, hey, this is what we need to talk about. And it's a two-way street, right? And we've always had that open and honest communication that drives us towards the solutions that we need.
Absolutely. Okay, let's just get started here, right? Trace3 has grown into a $200 million plus services business. Can you walk us through what transformation meant to you, and specifically on the operations side? How did it come by?
Yeah, so Trace3 originally was born out of like product reselling, and out of that was also just a lot of client intimacy. So we weren't just selling like reselling products. We were trusted advisors and trusted business partners with our clients, and with that, we tagged on our elite engineering to have professional services. So not only did we sell a product, we could implement it, we could optimize it, we could configure it. And then on top, like once we were doing that, then we continued to build on that. We added consulting services, and it started to just organically grow based off of that client-centric, very strategic partnership with our clients, and really focusing and making sure our clients are truly valued and they see the value in Trace3, which is great to have that organic, just natural progression like within all of our client books of business. On the operations side, though, growing organically and growing quite quickly like we did, it does cause like any type of organizational scale some challenges, right? We need to grow and adjust quickly and make sure that the things that worked when we were, this size also work
Yeah.
when we are scaling, right? So some things that were okay to get away with in Excel, then, once we are twice as big, doesn't quite make as much sense, right? And, everyone kind of working on their own, like is okay when you're a 10-man team. When you
Right.
expand into 1,000, people, and they're all doing something different, that causes a lot of like friction and just problems because everyone's working differently and also overlapping a lot of things. So there's inefficiencies that we can find in all those people doing things differently, right? So it's been a really transformative journey from going from a more product focused to like services, and we still do all of it. So making sure we still take care of our product portfolio, our professional services, our consulting services, and addressing all of the different ways that we sell, we deliver. It takes a massive amount of team like ownership and partnership across the different like pieces of our organization, and operations is the center point of all those things to make sure that we're scoping things correctly, we are invoicing our clients, where our clients, our delivery is successful, all those things. Like operations to me is the core to make sure all those things work correctly.
Absolutely, right? Like the point you mentioned about a 10-person team, right? And Excel would work, right? So we have seen time and time again when the Excel based approach was the best solution when you had 10 team members, right? But then how does it scale? How does it grow? So, very, very typical and standard problem statements we see across the board, right?
Yep.
So, as you go through this ops transformation process, right, specifically in terms of the quoting side of it or services quoting process of it. When you talk about ops transformation, you would typically be starting from lead to cash, right? The opportunity, the quoting process, the PSA, the contracting process. So could you just highlight or double click a little bit more about the quoting side of things and what are the aspects which you thought need to be solved?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, as we continue to scale, our teams scale, and the teams that we're quoting, by the time we looked at Provus, the teams that we're quoting was about a 300-person team of people that were involved in the scoping process, whether they were actually scoping or they were doing operations pieces of the scoping portion of sales. That's how many people this impacted as part of it. And so you can just imagine if you're living in Excel and email, it's very manual, and there's a lot of things that can get lost within that process with not having a single point of truth, right? And version control, an Excel can live within someone's
Yeah.
SharePoint somewhere. It could be on someone's hard drive somewhere. We don't know where it is, right? Or someone is in someone's inbox, right? And that creates a lack of visibility across
Right.
the quoting life cycle. We don't know when it started. We don't know where it's at. And until we get to the SOW stage and okay, it went through this process and now we can, create a SOW. But up until that point, we had a very, we had lack of visibility across the scoping process. We were able to put controls in place to mitigate some of the pieces and potential risk leading up to that, but it still was a manual process up
Right.
until this point. And we wanted to make sure that we're consistent across that too. And because we were getting Excels at the SOW point, it felt a little bit late in the game to make changes, which might be necessary to ensure we have accurate delivery and success for our clients. So not only the delivery success, but also margin, making sure that we are quoting it and the financials are correct. Going through the entire process until without any visibility until we get to an SOW just wasn't the best approach
Right.
for scale.
Right. So this is very, very typical from a lot of service organizations. I've heard this quite a lot of times, right? So since we've decided to kind of move away from the manual quoting process, shelve your Excel sheet, have a single source of truth, have a homogeneous data set kind of which you can report and align to. What were the key criteria for a solution, which led you to pick Provus as the solution for services quoting?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. The need for real-time financial visibility, like I mentioned, being able to know when a quote started and see the financials real time in a centralized tool and have access to that data in real time was a critical area that we
Right.
needed. So that single source of truth, the ability to price and scope accurately and also consistently was very key. And there are some things that we learned, I think we'll talk about as well a little bit later on is, and then also connecting our upstream and our downstream. So making sure that we are quoting consistently so that our delivery has the right scoping parameters to deliver to our clients successfully, and that we
Right.
meet all of the expectations for our internal teams, for our financial metrics, and for our clients, and being able to spot trends, especially marginal trends for our business. So it's, are we selling this many services? Are we not selling them? We didn't have visibility up until we were actually selling them.
Right.
Are we selling, are we scoping a lot of these things and not actually, getting signatures on it? We didn't have visibility. So we could have at one point had, 50 Excel documents out there of scoping that people spent time on that we never got a signature on, and we didn't know that time was being spent. Now we
Right.
know that, okay, these are quotes that we've gotten approved, but we don't ever get signature on. And so that's data that we didn't have.
Right.
So being able to spot those trends from services, margins, all of that was super critical for us. and also be able to support the users from like an automation perspective and give them
Right.
visibility into the process was critical as well. So with Provus, giving that automated approval flow
Hmm.
was very important to us, and making sure it was streamlined so they understood where it was and they had visibility to it, and making sure that this was phased, right? We wanted to make sure that we did it for our professional services, and then we were going to like roll it out for managed services as well to make sure everything worked well and correctly for professional services, because it is a little bit different in professional services versus managed services. So all of those things were like what we thought of before we went and selected Provus as a solution.
Makes sense, Lyndsey. And when you talk about data, right, that is now the center of all conversations, right? See, as simple as a question related to my deal is now stuck in an approvals. I don't know who it is. I don't know how long it's going to take, right? How can you know that, right? As against to a more complicated problem where I sold some services to my customer for this percent margin. Is it delivered at the same amount of margin, right? So that's a more complicated data driven report which you can get. But the point is, data is absolutely at the forefront, and being able to have that homogeneous set of data which you can really use to really not just fix errors in the process, but how do you optimize your operations and be more profitable as you grow and use that data to be better, right? I think
Well,
very.
yeah, and the version control too, right?
Yes.
So say we scope it and it gets to an approval level that it needs to be kicked back and reworked. We know that the original scope of it was this price point, and then it was
Right.
kicked back, and then we know that the next one came up, but in an Excel, you can't track it that way. It's
Correct.
just, you can maybe put it in the title and hope everyone labels it correctly, right? But in like Provis, the output documents actually like track it that way for you already. So the version control is something that we really like lean on to make sure we have like the latest, but then we could also go back and see if there's a history of like this being changed within the tool as well.
Right, right. And I just thought about like one of the LinkedIn posts I saw recently is, are you quoting with Excel sheet emails and hope, right? That was see
And
that
fingers crossed, right? Yeah.
yeah, and hopefully things will work out, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. So you have been with Provus for a while. You've kind of started to kind of get value out of it, and you have strived with your cross-functional teams to ensure that there is an end-to-end playbook on what to do and how to do something like this better, right? What do you or how do you characterize some of the outcomes which you set out to do? How do they look like today?
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking about it before. I kind of feel like I'm a Provus kind of super user at this point, because I've been working with you for so long. One of the key, going back to data, and being able to generate reports and very like easily. One of the things that I was pleasantly surprised with is being able to create reports just like really quickly and have access to that. And like live like margin tracking, we can go in, look at dashboards whenever we need to. And also one of the things that was great that we made sure was that Provus enabled for us too was the collaboration. So if I create a quote, I can send it to someone else on my team to make sure that they have eyes on it and they can collaborate on it with me back and forth. And then the automated approvals has been really helpful to make sure it goes through the process correctly and through the right process flow. So there's
Right.
a reason we put it like a process flow in the way that we did, so that there's it's step by step. So like financials versus like technical and margins, like there's a reason for it, and if you skip over it before, things could get kind of confused, and now that doesn't happen. So I think all of that has helped kind of expedite the life cycle, minus some of the like just user adoption that's kind of, you know pared it down a little bit. But I think overall, the ability to access data, the reporting, and our financials and everything living in one place has really helped our leadership have a better view into what we scope, how we're scoping, and overall like improved how we continue on with that process.
Absolutely. And that is really great to hear, right? When I started the conversation, I was talking about like, I'm really passionate about this space. And there is nothing like when a customer you collaborate with, you work with, and they really get the value they were setting out to get, right? Engaging with a company like Provus, right? And it's great, really great to hear. And thank you. Again, going back to the example of, weightlifting and going to the gym, let's say first time when you go to the gym, after a very long time, people say that I came to know about muscles I did not know about, which I had, because all of it starts to ache, right? So drawing a parallel onto that, when we go through this kind of a transformation, typically I hear a lot of my customers saying that, Anish, I didn't even know we had a problem like that, right? Do you have any examples like that where you didn't even realize that you had a muscle there, but it started to ache, but now it's kind of fixed? Is there anything like that which you want to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great comparison. So one of like when we roll this out, there's communication, there's training, user adoption, and change management that goes along with this. And there were some people that had some difficulty with it. And part of my approach was, and just overall, it's like, okay, meet with people, understand kind of where they're at, and understand where they're having issues. Is it system? Is it process? Is it user? Because sometimes it's user, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that was happening that we noticed was people were actually scoping incorrectly, that we didn't realize, because they were scoping it, we were signing it, and it was getting delivered okay. But as part of this process, we realized that people were scoping as more of a like a how-to guide versus like an actual scoping document. So we were able to kind of retrain some of our resources. And the joke was like, we're not like lawyers, right? We we are technical advisors and engineers, and that's how we should make sure we're building our scoping out to ensure successful delivery. But that was one of the things that was, I think, a really positive outcome that we didn't expect, but
Right.
was really good for us to catch and make sure that we could have the right training and level set the expectations again, with our resources that are scoping.
Right. And it completely makes sense too, right? So even when you look at a typical manual process, if you take of an Excel, and if there are multiple personas working together, collaborating to achieve a standardized outcome, it is very hard to draw the boundaries on who needs to do what, who is accountable, who is responsible, and what gets to do. Sometimes I need to be a lawyer, sometimes I need to be a doctor to kind of get what I want. But for an organization with 10 employees, that might be okay. But a company like yours with 300 plus sellers, right? That is a recipe, set for a disaster, right? I think having that kind of clarity in terms of what are the right rules, visibility on who can see what, all of those things really help. And I do feel like just by transforming a manual process into an automated system and something which is scalable, all these peripheral benefits are there for the taking, right? Which is really good.
Yeah,
So,
and this was kind of a way to almost kind of like force them into, so because we had the framework and we had the guidelines and stuff too, but because it was like to your point in an Excel, it was
right,
easy for them to not really follow it, right? But now that it's in a more structured framework, they're like once we talk through, like, oh, okay, and it kind of pushed the issue.
makes sense. Makes sense. So earlier you mentioned a little bit about the lack of visibility, right? In terms of data, right? But no data is more important than dollars and margin, right? So I want to kind of just touch upon a little bit there. In terms of the clarity which you are able to get with respect to your gross profit performance, and spotting critical trends when it comes to margin going up, margin going down. Um, what do you think about like what the process was and how it has evolved with Provus?
Yeah. So yeah, GP is one of our like key indicators for services, and something that we monitor like very closely. So, and it's something up until having it visible in Provus, we didn't see until we got to the actual like SOW process, like that step in the process of sales. So now, as we start the quote, we can see that and we can, okay, for a quote that's just started, that's in progress, we know it's at this percent, and ones that are approved, it's at like this percent, right? And we can see over the entire book of all the quotes at every stage what the margin is, and month over month, are we trending in the right direction, are we trending in the
Right.
wrong direction, and we can adjust. So we noticed, I think it was in May, now that we had the data, like, oh, like we wanted to be at a certain threshold and we weren't. So we took that data, we formed a plan. And one of the great things about Provus too is we created a plan, and within a day I was able to update the system to
Right.
enable that. And we are starting to see some positive changes based off of the implementation and the process that we put, that were honestly like really simple changes, but we wouldn't have caught that if it wasn't for the data and the visibility in the tool that we had.
Completely makes sense, right? And this is a topic for a separate, completely, 2 hour big conversation.
Yeah.
We can set up a separate webinar for this. So I've had so many horror stories which were kind of shared with me in terms of this particular kind of lack of visibility, how it impacts the business in so many different ways, right? So just imagine, right, when you have your business running in terms from a sales perspective, when you make a sale, you are assuming, hey, I'm going to get, let's say, X% margin. But unless until you actually know what is the delivered margin when it actually goes to implementation, is it dipping or is it going up? It is not just about understanding whether it is going down or up, but trying to figure out within the data as to why it is happening, right? So typically when we both are in services, so we understand, when you go into an implementation, we give investments, we give support to our customers in terms of, hey, I'm going to do this for free for you. It will dip the margin, but that is an intentional thing. But what if, to your point, the seller was not scoping it correctly, right? What if the seller did not anticipate the right duration? What if the seller did not have the right resources? Or what if the skill set of the resources were not to the point where it took more time for a resource to kind of really do it? So the value here is not just the trending of the margin and having visibility, but also a double click on where are the touch points where you can actually action to bridge that gap so that there is clarity, right? I think that is a very, very important topic, and good that we were able to kind of get to a clarity there and help Trace3 kind of move forward, right?
Yeah, I think that's only one of the many things. So I had a meeting earlier today that there's still even more, I think, within Provus that we can tap into that we haven't yet. And so I think there's even more that, like, to your point of like the skill sets of the resources that we're putting in there that we can like put into Provus to double click into the pipeline and resource need and demand and all of that. So I think there's nothing but upside of what we can build from here as well.
Right, right. So the next step is again looking forward. You mentioned that you set out to do transformation in a phased manner, right? Definitely I've seen folks do different ways, right? Some folks want to just boil the ocean, go with it, right? But when you talk about an enterprise transformation with 300 400 employees, right, working on the scale, it is always the smarter way to kind of go out, roll it out to a certain set of users, and then gradually go up, right? So right now when you look at the foundation which we have built on the first phase, right, and how it can support the continued trajectory of growth from a Trace3 perspective, what does this enable you operationally, right, as you kind of move forward?
So this enables us to, again, have that visibility and be able to adjust like processes and be able to scale our services, right? So, and also it being like very data driven versus, because a lot of the things that like we were talking about here too is like we felt like a pulse on it, right? It's like this feels like it's probably going that way, but we didn't necessarily have like data that was, ultimately we felt was very reliable, because again, it was living in Excel's in someone's like inbox, right? And we had to manually pull a lot of it. But now having the data and access to that and having a single source of truth, it will be able to give us like data-driven information to make decisions and update processes and other potential tools, and also create some automation. In the world of AI right now, there's a wealth of opportunities for leveraging that with, once you have the data,
Right.
like putting it in AI and allowing it to do like so many things to help like scale and help evolve a services business.
Absolutely. And in the same track, when we talk about phased rollouts, kind of how we operationally help the team grow from first setting up a foundation and then moving forward. And I'm sure that there is a lot of audience members who would want to understand more in terms of what kind of an approach in terms of change management should somebody adopt if you are looking at 300 400 employees going through a transformation. What would your guidance be to such leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. Change management, personally for me, is near and dear to my heart. I think it's the cornerstone, and something that, like honestly, is not looked at a lot in a lot of like implementations to the degree that like I would like it to. So it's really important to me, and I'm glad we're talking about it. Is really like understanding your end user and what they are expecting is one of the big things for me. And also over communicating and bringing people along for the journey are some of like the major things that I think need to happen. Is so understanding your user, over communicating with them, bringing them along, and then also having some champions along the ride with
Right.
you, making
Right.
sure that you're not in it alone and that other people are there to champion it along with you. I mean, I'll fully admit there we had some stumbling blocks as part of kind of our implementation, but how we addressed that was, I think I mentioned earlier, like one-on-one conversations, because some of it was just with any type of change, it's people not being resistant to it, right?
Yes.
They're just used to Excel. It's what they like. It's what they don't want to change, right? So how do you incentivize them? How do you get them to see the benefit? And also that translation, right? This is what you previously used, and here's how easy you can translate it here.
Right.
And the repetition, reminding them, you're not going to maybe get it the first time like as easily because you've done the Excel 100 times. Like, you have to give it more than like one try before, you can just say, no, I don't like it, right? So like give yourself like some grace, and like the more conversations you have around it, the more people used it and like adapted to it. It completely changed like mindsets, and I think people really see the value in it now. And so making sure, again, just over communicating, having like direct conversations with people and having champions are really going to be key to overcoming some of like the resistance to change that naturally happens in these situations.
Right. Right. And like the working with so many services companies, right? Like it is very interesting, right? We work with a variety of engineering consulting firms, big companies, right? So they are in the business of helping their customers transform. So they have their own arm to for change management, right? But then when it comes to their own organizations, it's always hard, right? Change management is a hard function to kind of get into. But I really liked the point you made about bringing those end users and actual users of coding into the process as we define requirements, as we do conference room pilots to get their inputs. I feel that helps quite a lot, right? And one of the other strategies which we typically adopt is day in the life, right? So if you have three personas working on a specific outcome, what does your day look like by using an Excel sheet and an email and calling somebody on the phone? If that process is completely automated and transformed with Provus, how would that look like, right? I think making sure that that clarity is brought out, right, which really help. But really, really good insights,
Yeah.
right?
And I think also just having realistic expectations too. So when you have such a broad like user base, like recognizing that you're not going to solve for everybody's wants and needs. So
Right.
some of the it's some of the feedback is like, oh, I wouldn't use this. Like, okay, well, we didn't build it for like one person, right? We built it for an entire enterprise, and we're not going to make everybody happy all the time. And that wasn't the goal. Like we set out a standard, and that standard is what we adhere to, right?
Right.
So just having realistic expectations that you're not going to make everybody happy, and that's not what the end goal should be.
Right. Right. And there is always going to be folks who are like so excited to just be in Excel because, like we know, right? Excel is great in terms of the flexibility, but then flexibility without control leads to a lot of chaos, right? I think that is kind of where we can draw the line. And the point related to what is your role in the organization. Say, for example, if you have an Excel-led process, the sellers are at will to kind of do whatever they want to do. But then the finance and operations teams, their hands are tied. They have no control over what really goes out, right? And it is definitely nothing which can be scalable. So it is always kind of a balance. And in some of these conversations, when you have different team members coming in with different point of views, and it is really interesting as part of the design cycles, right? When you go in, you can really understand, hey, where the gaps are in terms of people's understanding, right? So it was a eye-opening experience for me too, right? One of the best implementations I've been part of. So
Yeah, glad to hear that.
coming towards the end of the project, once you kind of are done, let's say there are a lot of folks out there who are really interested to kind of maybe take this journey out, right? So they understand the value, but they are a little gun shy, okay, what is going to happen? And it's not a small undertaking, right? So what would your advice be to somebody who's thinking about this, but saying, where do I start? What do I do? So because you have been there, you have done that, and you have shown the outcome. So what would your guidance be to somebody who's like ready to start or thinking to start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say start with what you're trying to solve for, and be really concise and thoughtful about what are the problem areas, and be like really clear on like kind of what the requirements are that you're trying to solve for, and make sure that the scoping tool, because there's an entire like sales process around this, right? So you might need like a scoping tool, you might need a SOW tool, you might need a CRM, and think through the entire kind of like life cycle, and what type of tools you need to enable you to be successful, and the problem statements that you're trying to solve, I think, are going to be critical in making sure that you look for the right solutions. And once you get that and you go like chat with vendors, make sure you ask a lot of questions, make sure they are looking to partner with you and want to be your solution like partner in it. One of the things working with you, Anish, there's been a lot of times we've had really good conversations around, hey, this is what we want to do. And like, okay, like what about this, right? And it's a really good just solution focused dialogue that we thought about it this way, but there's another way to approach it that we didn't even think of that's better, right? So that's one of the things that I always look for in a vendor and a partner, is someone that's not just going to take what I give them and just like checkbox it, but think about it and say, okay, what are you trying to solve for? And this
Right.
is how we think about it as well. And what are your thoughts? And have a dialogue around it. So those are some of the things that I personally would recommend others kind of consider as well.
Absolutely. And again, that brings a lot of fond memories in my mind, right? So, one of the first things I say in a kickoff meeting when I start a project or engage with a customer is that, hey, you're going to not like me first few months of the project, but you're going to love me later, right? So, we
That's not
don't.
true. I liked you from the beginning.
So we at Provus, right? What we want to be clear about is that the partnership we have with a prospect or a customer is not in terms of us selling a product and saying thank you, right? We bring in a lot of industry experience with respect to how services quoting should be done. What are the best practices? What and where is the industry going? And how can we partner with your team for scale? everybody is going through a transformation journey, right? Earlier from maybe an Excel to an automated system to maybe 100% native Salesforce system, to going completely to an agentic interface, right? So we are developing our capabilities and tools to kind of drive, and we want to kind of partner with our customers as we go. So we bring in a wealth of knowledge in terms of what is the best way to solve something, right? And I think that has really helped us quite a lot to kind of gain some good credibility in the market, right? So jumping on to some Q&A. Before we do that, I just wanted to say what Lyndsey and the Trace3 team has achieved is truly incredible, right? So there is a lot which we have unpacked right here. But the key thing to note here is that driving entire organization from a manual operational process to an automated process is no small feat. And to be able to realize the value which Trace3 set out to do, right? Truly remarkable. A great example of what is possible, right? When visibility, control, and automation is brought about in your services quoting process. And these are the key capabilities which you really need to sell and run your business with confidence, right? We'll open it up for Q&A. If you have already kind of dropped some questions, we can tackle those, or if you have any questions, please feel free to kind of add them on. Okay, so we have a question coming up. If you were speaking to other ops leaders who are still managing services quoting via Excel sheet or email, what's one of the one mindset shift and tactical change you would tell them to prioritize, first to start their transformation journey?
Honestly, I think it would be conversations with leadership, making sure that they are aware of some of the challenges as well. It's starting that early communication, right? And having that early buy-in and the early kind of adoption of like, hey, we've identified a problem, and making sure that they have that buy-in, because ultimately they're going to be like your champions, right? If at the end of the day, like my CEO saying, you guys are doing this, they're going to do it, right? So making sure that you have the leadership buy-in, and putting all that together, and then communicating it with the teams effectively, and again, bringing in the right people to the conversation, so that again, we're not going to make everybody happy, but at least they are brought to the table. They have a voice in the conversation, and they feel that they're being heard. I think like really makes a huge difference in the downstream kind of implementation and user adoption for not just this implementation, but any type of implementation. It makes a huge difference.
Makes sense. And it is that kind of basis and kind of that continuous loop which kind of helps, right? So
yep. And continuing to optimize too. So one of the things that I'm excited about too, and I kind of touched on a little bit, but is the enhancements that we can continue to do, right? So we built the framework, we built the scoping tool in Provus for Trace3, but there's so much more we can do. There's enhancements, there's automation, there's AI, there's just a lot of things that we can do. We can connect our systems even more integrations. The sky's the limit in terms of things that we can continue to do. It's just a matter of kind of priorities and where
right.
we can where to start. So that's kind of the next kind of fun journey to ensure we're continuing to scale and support our services business in the future.
Makes sense. Let's see if there is another question. Okay, I think that concludes our session for today. I want to offer up my big thanks to Lyndsey for sharing all your valuable insights and giving us a real look at the behind the scenes from a Trace3 perspective, right? How you are protecting your $200 million in services revenue with an automated AI first quoting solution, right? And thank you, Lyndsey, for all your insights here. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We appreciate you guys spending the time with us on a Thursday morning. I hope all of you guys are good to go. We will send out the recording into along with the slides within the next 24 hours, and then we will connect with you soon, right? If anybody on the audience side is kind of looking forward to a quoting solution to ensure that your teams are quoting faster, pricing smarter, and delivering outcomes with confidence, please reach out to us, and we'll be happy to do a demo and get the process started. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, Anish.
Thank you.
Bye.